Welcome back to NDI Central Live, coming to you from the NewTek booth at NAB 2018 in lovely Las Vegas, Nevada. And my next guest is NewTek's very own PR Director, Mr. Scott Carroll. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. I'm very glad to be here.
So people are wondering, why is the PR Director on NDI Central Live?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I'm glad you invited me because I love my job. And the reason why I love my job is because I am afforded this really unique observation point of what's going on in our industry. Because I'm inside of NewTek, and part of my job is to chase Andrew Cross around and try to keep up with what's on his mind, which is impossible.
Yeah, right.
But he is got to be the greatest software coder in our industry, hands down. The chief architect of NDI. It's his vision is our vision. This idea of computers and software and networks being the future of live broadcast. It's also my job to keep my eye on what's going on in the rest of the industry. So from that perch, if you will, it's a fascinating view. As we watch NDI roll out, this is the third year of since we introduced NDI, and it's not only grown, but the adoption rate of it has easily doubled in the last 6 months. So it wasn't just like a chunk of early adopters and it goes flat. It just grows all the time. So it's gotten, it's achieving. It's hard to argue that it hasn't achieved critical mass, particularly at this NAB.
Well, I mean, with the developers that I'm speaking to on the show, we're hearing a lot of people walking up to various booths saying, is this NDI compatible? Do you have NDI compatible? They're asking for NDI compatibility. So, that's a big thing that drives it. And, it just seems to be like a snowball growing and growing.
I'm try to understand the industry. There's a lot of history in it, and really what we're witnessing is the parallel tracks of broadcast engineering, traditional television developed in the 1930s during the Depression, right? And then you had the advent of the personal computer in the 80s when NewTek was born. And they're on parallel lines. They're not supposed to meet. And before the PC, broadcast engineering was high technology, right? But it was an elitist group of engineers that, defined specifications, and there was a way to make television.
And another group of engineers that knew how to operate it.
That's right. And you'd have to be highly trained in order to do it. Then along comes the computer and internet protocol and networking and all this kind of stuff, which obviously is far more powerful than a linear signal path where now everyone's walking around today with a supercomputer in their hand, right? So how do you get these two parallel lines to cross and meet? And you have to understand both sides of those lines. And in Andrew's case, he does, and he happens to be a Mount Rushmore software developer for our industry. And basically what he's trying to do is get baseband to meet IP, and I think what the SMPTE 2110 guys are doing is trying to get IP to meet baseband. And it's not a format war, it's just two different approaches, right? And they're both working now. And again, my perspective, working for NewTek, which is a relatively small company in our industry, having our technology adopted, in the same sentence as the traditional big boy broadband broadcast engineering community. It's special, and what we're seeing at NAB 2018 is that convergence, really like tipping points, critical mass. This is the year where it's really going to just take off, and we're witnessing it. So that's why it's very exciting.
What about some of the users out there? I know that you've been talking to a lot of different users and how they're applying not only NewTek technology but NDI technology to their workflows.
Well, the thing about NDI, because you couldn't do this before, and even when we introduced it, we knew that people were going to figure out things to do with it that we couldn't figure out or think of at the time ourselves. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So, and I know you've had some of these guests on your show. One of them is the weather company, which I think is, they're so forward thinking, where literally they're broadcasting to an app on the phone because that's what people are using to consume content. So that's their target. And they're about the weather, and the weather is the story that never ends. You know, news, weather, and sports. And there's amazing weather happening somewhere. And in the old days, you'd have to, if you wanted to be there, you'd have to, they would have meetings of everyone, how many engineers we need. We get send a truck down, it takes 3 days, and can't get in or out, and then they got to figure out how to transmit back to and it'd be very expensive and time-consuming and take a lot of people. But now what they're doing is they're using content created by people on the ground that are posting it themselves to the internet. And how do you get that content back to the control room? Well, NDI is your answer. So they probably talked about their new building that they went into, which is all IP. They're running NDI through everything, where they're literally watching weather as it's happening around the world by keeping tabs on these like storm chaser types. And when they see something happening, they can switch to it immediately. They don't have to have a meeting about it. And not only that, but everybody in their building can see it, right? And that's unprecedented, and that's forward thinking. And that, to me, looks a lot like what I think the future is going to look like, what they're doing. So that's one fantastic example. I know you talked to Peter Young, who's got a company in British Columbia, in the Vancouver area. And, this guy's a big thinker. You give somebody a tool that's designed to do something new and different, the creative human mind will figure out what to do with it. So his idea is, he calls it hub casting. So he's got a control room in Vancouver. And he can use cameras, multiple cameras from literally any destination in the world. He's using LiveView, I believe, where the cellular bonded thing, he can get those camera signals frame synced into his control room, and he can switch from right there. So he could create content for literally anyone, anywhere, from one spot in the world, which, and the amazing thing is the cost, right? There's no trucks involved. You don't have to send anybody anywhere. You don't have to pay for the travel. You don't have to have all this gear that needs to be transported back and forth. You can just fire up some cameras and get some signals at a cost that just you could barely conceive of just a few years ago.
That's true.
Yeah,
that's true. I mean, what once was relegated to sending out a satellite truck has now been replaced.
4 cameras in
by cellular technology, by internet technology. I mean, just what we did with Skype a few years ago has changed a lot of that. So more and more, and then you just, the regular guy on the street with his cell phone in his pocket picking up and shooting footage, that's now combined into, this type of program. Peter showed, we did a little demonstration walking around the booth with his cell phone, sending that signal to Vancouver through their switcher, through their TriCaster system, and then back to us here. So, I mean, the possibilities
are pretty endless. Like, okay, could you do that last year at NAB? I don't think so. Yeah. This year, we can show you how to do it, and it's that's
we have companies like MediaLooks that has a solution to pick up an NDI signal, send that over the internet, bring it back out as an NDI signal in your network to be brought into your switcher or anywhere else that you like to be brought into your production. So
that's a game changer.
Yeah, truly is.
And not only that, but like we have like high schools that are using this. They're using NDI. They're using we have this product called Media DS, which is a delivery solution. Where typically, when we went to high school, it was the morning bulletin. We had an intercom system. The bell would ring, and like you'd do the flag salute, and then somebody's voice would come on and say, "Hey, pizza's a special and lunch today, and the football team plays at 3, and buy your tickets for the theater."
Now it's a television show.
Now it's a television show with just like a news station with this affordable equipment. that the kids are learning how to operate, how to script, how to write, how to communicate, how to behave in front of a camera, interact, and they'll have field reporters that will be literally out with an iPad or an iPhone using NDI to connect back to the control room, so they can go anywhere on their campus that they want to go. And it's affordable to do, and you couldn't do this 2-3 years ago, and it's at that level already. And I'd mentioned the media DS. The problem that a lot of schools, a lot of companies would have is when they want to deliver that signal to, say, every classroom, you better have a lot of bandwidth. And most schools, it's expensive.
Yeah.
And not only that, but your signal will leave the firewall at school up to a CDN that you pay for, a content delivery network, and then back down in through your firewall and then distribute. So if it's one classroom, that's one dedicated line, right, times, say, 30 or whatever, and it could overwhelm your network. Well, Media DS basically serves media inside of the firewall.
It's like creating your own internet
exactly right.
broadcast system inside of a network.
And there's a company, I think they're in California, they're based there, they have offices around the world where the chief executive wants to fire up the troops or tell them about the new thing or whatever, and they want to use video to do this. And it's hard getting a video signal routed around the world if you're a big company like that, but with this particular product, all you need to do is one signal, not many signals, but one across, and when you capture that one signal, then you can distribute it within your building to as many people as you need. So that's sort of a big change, And not to mention 4K. I don't know how much you've talked about 4K on your show.
A little bit here and there.
4K is hard to do, and it's really expensive, And but because we're using internet protocol and software to do this, we actually have an end-to-end 4K solution that, you will not find a more affordable workflow for 4K anywhere at the Las Vegas Convention Center at NAB 2018 than right here at the NewTek.
That's right.
Which to me says, okay, when 4K really starts to take off, it's not going to come from the top of the food chain. It's going to come from the grassroots, because that's where it's affordable to do. And it's full it's 60 frames per second, full 4K. And when you look at the cost of doing it with the NDI sort of IP solution that we're offering versus the traditional way of doing it, it's like a no-brainer. It really is. And speaking of 4K, those hardware-based switchers that are 128 channels of HD, when you go to 4K, they're not 128 channels anymore. They're now 36 channels, because you need to use up 4 slots or 4 channels for each single 4K channel. It's just crazy. Yeah.
Well,
whose idea was this?
Yeah. Whereas our solution, the IP series, the VMC1, is a true 124 channel, 128 channel system, 4K system, individual 4K channels.
At a fraction of the cost.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's
really cool.
It's funny, because I've had that conversation several times. Like, well, they're 128 channels, or we're 124 or whatever, hundreds of channels. Like, no, not necessarily. So, got to compare apples with apples.
Yeah. So, I'm the PR director for NewTek. It's my job to get the press releases,
get the news out,
right? So typically at NAB we might have 1 or 2 announcements. This year we had 8, and one of them included like 12 things. It was
the kitchen sink.
In my time, and that's what we called it, the kitchen sink press release, because we put everything in it. So we've done this progression. We built the rails called NDI. You can use these rails to put new trains on and put them wherever you want, and we're going to put 4K on them. We're going to put graphics on them. And then we had these announcements. We're going to put replay on them. You know what? We're going to put cameras on them. These things have been coming out sort of in a regular cadence since we introduced NDI. But at this NAB, it's virtualized control rooms. We have a SMPTE 2110 to NDI conversion box. We have something called live graphics. I don't know if you've mentioned this on your show.
A few times.
it allows the entire community of After Effects users to bring in graphics simply and easily into a TriCaster production.
TC1 and
hard to do the way we're doing it, but we figured out how to do it, and it's
not just graphics, motion graphics.
Motion graphics, thank you. That's new. We have. Yeah, I got into like, oh God, I can't remember all these things. We have a new Connect Spark. It's a converter box. It'll convert 4K signals right into NDI. Remote storage, which is a big deal. Like literally, we are the, if this is kind of what, when we have the press come and talk about, we know we're like sorry, start with an apology. Sorry, we're going to kill you with a lot of announcements here. The one thing to really remember is that the all IP end-to-end workflow, we're the only company at NAB that can offer all of it, from the cameras to the production to the enhancement with the graphics to the storage. That was a missing piece that's now there, to the delivery. All over IP. Cat 5 cables. Beginning to end.
Cat 5A.
Cat 5A, thank you.
Cat 6.
Yeah.
So watch those cables.
Yeah.
Gotta use the right ones.
But you only need one of them. You don't need like 25 of them.
True.
Yeah. So that's been very exciting and certainly different. It's definitely a progression. It definitely feels like the critical mass. There was the Microsoft Skype announcement. There was the Avid Media Composer announcement. Both of those.
Well, yeah, there's something that I don't think we've mentioned yet, is that Microsoft Skype is now NDI compatible.
That's right.
Right?
And this is a consumer-grade Skype that most of us have. So it's on your phone. And there's 300 million Skype users out there, according to Microsoft. So that
Skype is now an NDI source.
Yes. Yeah, which is crazy. And if you are better at following the logic than I am, what Skype allows you to do, because it can connect certain things to certain other things that traditionally were like very expensive to do, but because it's now NDI enabled, you can use Skype to get your signal from A to B that you couldn't do a week ago.
Right.
So it's like, oh my God.
And the hits just keep on coming.
That's it.
All right, Scott. Well, thanks for taking time off your busy demo schedule.
It's been my pleasure
to be on the show.
All right. Thank you, Rex.
And get back to it. Well, stick around. We've got Peter Howell, I believe, coming up next. Back-to-back NewTek news section. He's going to be talking about professional services at NewTek. So stick around. We'll be back after a short break.